Welcome to this National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting video, covering what's new in NGER, technical guidance, and tips for compliant reporting for 2023 to 24 NGER reports due 31 October 2024. Throughout this presentation, we'll be using a range of key terms. The Clean Energy Regulator, CER, we, and us all refer to the Clean Energy Regulator and may be used interchangeably. The Department, or DQ, refers to the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. NGER refers to the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme as a whole. We'll start with key concepts in NGER before looking at resources to support your reporting. We'll then take a look at what's new for the current reporting period, 2023 to 24, as well as what to expect for the next reporting period, 2024 to 25. We will finish with some tips to help you submit a compliant NGER report. First, let's go over some of the key concepts related to reporting under NGER. The National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme was established in 2007 as a single national framework for reporting data on greenhouse gas emissions, energy production, energy consumption, and other specified information. Data collected under NGER is shared with specific users who are defined in the NGER Act, and some elements of the data are published on our website in February each year. The objectives of the NGER scheme are to provide a single national reporting framework, to inform government policy and the Australian public, to help meet Australia's international reporting obligations, to assist Commonwealth, state and territory government programs and activities, to avoid duplication of similar reporting requirements in the states and territories, and to help contribute to the achievement of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets by ensuring that emissions from safeguard facilities decline in a way that is consistent with Australia meeting its 2030 and 2050 emissions reduction targets. The three pieces of NGER legislation relevant for this webinar are the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Act 2007, the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Regulations 2008, and the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Measurement Determination 2008. We will refer to these titles in this webinar as the Act, the Regulations, and the Determination. Very basically, the Act gives the power that enables NGER. The regulations say what should be included in a report, and the determination gives the details of how to measure emissions and energy. In a bit more detail, the NGER Act establishes the framework for the NGER scheme and gives the Clean Energy Regulator the legal authority to require corporations to report their energy and emissions data. The Act also enables several instruments which provide information about corporations' obligations. The regulations set out more detail about what is required under the NGER scheme, including further definitions of key concepts like defining a facility, details on what is to be included in applications under NGER, like an application for registration, and what must be provided in reports under the Act, like what activities and information need to be included. The determination describes the methods, standards, and criteria to be applied when estimating greenhouse gas emissions, energy production, and energy consumption. The determination is updated annually to make sure that it remains up to date in terms of technology, measurement practices, and data inputs. The NGER Audit Determination 2009 and the NGER Safeguard Mechanism Rule 2015 are also enabled by the Act. The audit determination provides information to auditors about the way that NGER audits are to be conducted. This video will not cover the audit determination. This video also will not cover the Safeguard Mechanism Rule. However, safeguard facilities should also be aware of their Safeguard Mechanism specific obligations, including the Production Variable Reporting Form. Further information about these requirements can be found on our website. As this webinar provides technical advice for NGER reporters, most of the details will relate to the content of the regulations and the determination, with a focus on the changes that apply to the 2023 to 24 NGER reporting year. So NGER data covers broadly two things: emissions and energy. All sources of greenhouse gas emissions listed in section 1.10 of the determination, along with production and consumption of the fuels and energy commodities that are listed in Schedule 1 of the regulations, must be accounted for and reported when they exceed the applicable thresholds. We'll look at emissions first. For each reportable emissions activity at each of your facilities, you must follow specific procedures to determine your emissions estimate. In NGER, these procedures are called methods. The determination splits the requirement for reporting greenhouse gas emissions into 5 categories. These categories align with the source categories reported under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Scope 1 emissions, also known as direct emissions, are reported under the following categories. Fuel combustion, which includes activities like electricity generation, transport, and heating. Fugitive emissions, which are the release of greenhouse gases associated with coal mining and the oil and natural gas sector, and carbon capture and storage. Industrial processes, including greenhouse gases that are released from chemical, mineral, or metal processes, as well as the leakage of refrigerant gases. Waste emissions, which covers the release of greenhouse gases from landfill and wastewater processing. Note that these source categories are differentiated by activity, not simply by industry. Even if you're operating a coal mine or a chemical production facility or a landfill, the fuel that you use for purposes like powering machinery and generating heat would still be classified under fuel combustion. Scope 2 emissions, or indirect emissions, occur as a result of electricity which is used by a facility but which is generated outside that facility's boundaries. Scope 2 emissions are physically produced by the burning of fossil fuels by the generator of the electricity, but attributed to the facility which uses the electricity. Added together, these Scope 1 and Scope 2 emission sources and energy production and consumption cover the majority of Australia's energy and emissions activities. Remember, you must report emission sources listed in Section 1.10 of the determination and fuels and energy commodities listed in Schedule 1 of the regulations if they exceed the relevant threshold. If your fuel is not listed or is below the threshold, you do not need to report it. Next, we'll outline the resources we've made available to support your reporting for 2023 to 24. We have a new Reporter Support Dashboard, which is a one-stop shop for ENGA support materials. To find the Supporter Dashboard, navigate to the CER website and click Schemes. Select ENGA Scheme, which takes you to the ENGA landing page. Scroll down from here, and you will see a link to the Support Dashboard, bringing you to this page. The Reporter Support Dashboard contains links to reporting guides, calculators, a page outlining amendments to ENGA legislation, information on record keeping and compliance, a login link to EARS, the Emissions and Energy Reporting System, information on the 2023 to 24 changes to EARS, and links to webinars and training videos. We hope you find this useful for your reporting this year, and we welcome your feedback on this new page. Now let's take a look at what is new in ENGA legislation for the 2023 to 24 reporting year. The most significant change was the introduction of the new voluntary market-based method for Scope 2 emissions. Most ENGA reporting methods are location-based. This means that the emissions are tied to a time and physical location where the greenhouse gas was released into the atmosphere. The first market-based method was introduced in Section 7.4 of the determination for 2023 to 24. It is an optional method and gives ENGA reporters the opportunity to make claims about purchases of green power electricity or voluntarily surrendered large-scale generation certificates, or LGCs. These actions can reduce the market-based Scope 2 emissions total for a facility. Location-based and market-based accounting methods are distinct and complementary approaches for estimating emissions. For Scope 2 emissions, they are different ways of accounting for the indirect emissions from the consumption of electricity. Together, these methods provide a more complete picture of emissions from electricity use. For 2023 to 24, you must still report location-based Scope 2 emissions, as you did last year. You may choose to also report market-based Scope 2 emissions. Please note that the location-based and market-based totals will almost certainly be different even if you don't surrender any LGCs. We expect the totals to differ because the methods are different. As mentioned, location-based and market-based Scope 2 emissions methods are distinct and complementary. I'll now provide some more details on the location-based method before discussing the new market-based method in more detail. You must report location-based Scope 2 emissions for any facility that purchases or otherwise acquires electricity from outside the facility, or that is a transmission or distribution network that has line losses. You can't reduce your location-based Scope 2 emissions by green power electricity purchases, surrendering LGCs, or any other means, including having a power purchase agreement with a renewable or non-renewable electricity generator. The location-based Scope 2 emissions total is used to determine any obligations under the ENGA scheme. For example, location-based Scope 2 emissions are used to determine if you meet a reporting threshold. If your combined Scope 1 and location-based Scope 2 emissions meet the reporting threshold, then you still have to report, even if your market-based Scope 2 emissions total takes your combined emissions below that threshold. If you choose to report market-based Scope 2 emissions, please read our new guideline carefully before reporting. There are 2 worked examples which will help you understand the new method. There is a lot of detail in this formula which I'll talk through in the next slide. Make sure that you keep evidence to support your claims. If you report market-based Scope 2 emissions this year, you can expect to be asked to submit your evidence to support claims after you submit your ENGA reports. A quick note on aggregate facilities. We expect a single activity in each facility aggregate to represent the market-based Scope 2 emissions that apply across all facilities in the aggregate. You don't need to create a separate activity for each facility within the aggregate. Now that we've covered the key points, I'll talk through the formula for the market-based method. At first glance, this looks like a complex formula with some terms you may not be familiar with. We find that when explaining this formula, it's helpful to break it into 4 distinct parts. The first part determines the quantity of electricity that is purchased or acquired from the grid that is not considered renewable and therefore has emissions associated with it. Q is the quantity of purchased or acquired electricity. Losses for transmission or distribution networks are not considered under this method. RPP is the renewable power percentage. This value is calculated by the CER and published on our website. It is hard-coded in years. JRPP is the jurisdictional renewable power percentage. The only state or territory with a JRPP for 2023 to 24 is the ACT, 74.13% for 23-24. This value is calculated by the department. I haven't yet talked about that Q-exempt term. Don't worry, we'll cover it in the second block right here. So this second block is the quantity of electricity that is exempt from the RET liability that is not considered renewable under jurisdictional schemes. Q-exempt is the quantity of electricity that is exempt from the mandatory renewable energy target, or RET. If you haven't applied for an exemption certificate from the RET scheme or don't know what that is, it's very likely that your value for Q-exempt is 0. So, taken together, the first 2 parts of this formula cover the total purchased or acquired electricity for the facility that is not considered renewable. Now onto the third part of the formula. This part lets you report your eligible renewable energy certificates, or RECs, to reduce your residual electricity amount. The first term is REC-SUR. This is where you can reflect voluntary surrenders of LGCs and purchases of green power electricity for which someone surrenders LGCs on your behalf. Both reduce your market-based Scope 2 emissions total. Note there are some eligibility requirements for renewable energy certificates. LGCs must be voluntarily surrendered in the REC registry within the reporting year. You can only use LGCs voluntarily surrendered between 1 July 2023 and 30 June 2024 when reporting market-based Scope 2 emissions for 2023-24. Read our guideline and Section 7.4 of the determination carefully to ensure you only report eligible RECs. Next, we'll look at the REC on-site term. Only RET participants will have values for REC on-site. This is for on-site renewable generation that has or will generate LGCs. Finally, the 1000 multiplier converts the units of RECs from megawatt hours into kilowatt hours, the same units as Q and Q-exempt. Finally, in Part 4, we see that the whole amount in brackets, the residual electricity, is multiplied by the residual mix factor and divided by 1000 to convert this amount into Scope 2 emissions in tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. The RMF is a value determined by the department and published in Part 6 of Schedule 1 of the determination. The residual electricity is the amount in the brackets now highlighted by the red rectangle. Residual electricity may be reduced by using less electricity that was produced outside your facility, conducting activities in a region with a JRPP, or purchasing more green power electricity or making more voluntary LGC surrenders. As a final note, the circled terms in the equation are the ones that you need to enter into EARS for 2023 to 24 reporting. The other terms are hard-coded in EARS. Aside from the new market-based Scope 2 emissions method, the other changes of note for 2023 to 24 are the Method 1 emission factor used to estimate emissions of methane from Queensland open-cut coal mines is now 0.031 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents per tonne of run-of-mine coal extracted from the mine. This has been updated in EARS. Updates have been made to the methods for estimating methane emissions released from landfills, and these have also been updated in EARS. 2 new biofuels, renewable diesel and renewable aviation kerosene, have also been created and added. These are now available to select in EARS for the relevant activities. You can find more information on the 2023 to 24 amendments at DEQ's Consultation Hub, shown on the left, and the Federal Register of Legislation, shown on the right. The addresses are shown in the images, or you can find them easily with the search engine. The 2023 ENGA Scheme Updates page on the DEQ website has information about the consultation relevant to the 2023 to 24 reporting year. You can read the consultation outcomes paper on this site. DEQ updates ENGA legislation for each new financial year and typically runs a public consultation period a few months in advance of making those amendments. You can also see historical consultations or keep an eye out for future consultation periods to have a say in what ENGA legislation might come to look like. At the Federal Register of Legislation website, you can see a list of all compilations of a piece of legislation. Click on the left to see the compilation that incorporates the amendments that have commenced up to that date. You can click on the link highlighted on the right of the screen to see the details of the amendment itself, including the explanatory statement. From the amendment screen, click the drop-down menu to read the explanatory statement. This has more information about the reasons for the amendments. You can access downloadable versions of the legislative text and the explanatory statement if it's available. You can download in Word or PDF format. You can use these buttons to download the legislative text or explanatory statement that is displayed on your browser screen. You can click Text to display the legislative text in your browser. The compilation you refer to is important. If you're looking at a compilation that doesn't apply to the relevant reporting year, you might find methods, emission factors, or other reporting requirements that are no longer applicable, or that are not yet applicable. You should use the following compilations of ENGA legislation for your 2023 to 24 reporting. Use compilation 16 of the determination. We suggest you use compilation 25 of the regulations. You may also use compilation 26 and 27, as these compilations have administrative updates. Use compilation 23 of the ENGA Act. You may also use compilation 24 or 25 for ENGA reporting. Now that we've looked at the main changes for 2023 to 24 reporting and where to find more information about these changes, I'll show you where to find information on changes for 2024 to 25. Just like for the previous year, you can see the 2024 consultation outcomes paper on DEQ's Consultation Hub, and you can see details of the amendments for 2024 to 25 on the Federal Register of Legislation website. We also have a summary of amendments to ENGA legislation for 2024 to 25 on the CER website. You can find a link to this page on the Reporter Support dashboard. Scroll down for 2024 to 25 information. The 2024 to 25 amendments do not affect reports due by 31 October for the 2023 to 24 reporting year. But they may affect decisions you make now, and we encourage you to review these amendments. In the fifth section of this video, I'll provide some tips to help you submit an ENGA report that is compliant with the ENGA legislation. First, make sure you're using the current guidance materials and calculators. We update the calculators every year to reflect changes in the ENGA legislation. If you use last year's calculators, it will probably result in you submitting incorrect data. We've completed our annual update of reporting guidelines for 2023 to 24. we recommend you download a new copy from the ENGA Reporting Guides page. If you've already started your reporting, then we suggest you review these changes to the guidelines marked with an asterisk. These are the ones that have had a significant update this year. Please note that the frequently asked questions are now located on the ENGA Reporting Guides page under the link ENGA Quick Help Topics. In each guideline, on the page after the disclaimer, you'll see a section describing the changes to that guideline in more specific detail. You may be able to simplify your reporting by removing elements from EARS that are no longer relevant. All facilities and activities from your 2022 to 23 reporting are carried over into the 2023 to 24 workspace. You can remove an activity if you are no longer using a particular fuel or process. Click the X icon to remove an activity. This removes data associated with it in the current workspace, but does not affect data in previously submitted reports. You can also remove a facility from the workspace, for example if you have sold it. Removing a facility in EARS will also remove all data recorded against that facility, including all activity data. Again though, this will not affect data in previously submitted reports. Check out the Emissions and Energy Reporting System User Guide for step-by-step instructions on how to delete an entity in EARS. In ENGA, petrol is referred to as gasoline. When gasoline is used to run machinery, the activity is reportable as emissions from the release of combustion of liquid fuels. We encourage you to provide us with any additional information you may have when you submit your report. These files can be any size but must be in PDF format. Attaching documents such as a basis of preparation, a voluntary audit report, or details of changes to your business operations or boundaries may assist us in interpreting your report, especially in cases where your report has changed significantly this year compared to previous years. It might even save us contacting you over the Christmas period when we are assessing submitted ENGA reports. We've updated our information on developing a basis of preparation in our ENGA Quick Help Topics guideline on our website. It's worth a read if you're considering submitting a basis of preparation this year. Staying on top of changes in the reporting requirements and tidying up your EARS workspace are some of the big picture actions you can take to help you submit a compliant ENGA report. I'll also cover some very specific areas that we've noticed over the last few years. Check units of measurement carefully. For example, liquid fuels must be recorded in EARS in kilolitres. If your organisation uses a different unit of measure for liquid fuels, such as litres, you must convert this to kilolitres before entering data in EARS. If you get this wrong, it can increase your reported emissions and energy by 1,000 times. Another common error is incorrect allocation of fuel combustion activities and electricity production activities. For fuel combustion, this is the split between fuel combusted for stationary purposes, for transport purposes, and for electricity generation. For electricity production, electricity produced on site must be allocated between for use on site, for use off-site on a network, and for use off-site not on a network. Each of these needs to be reported as separate activities in EARS. See section 2.41 of the measurement determination for details. Correct allocation is really important as it affects the way that ENGA data is interpreted by its users. Calculation errors and data entry errors are also quite common. They're usually due to errors in calculations or spreadsheets. Finally, reporting renewable electricity is an area where we still see some issues. I'll explain this in more detail on the next slide. The most common issue we see when reporting production of renewable electricity is when people delete the automatically generated activities in EARS. The key point here is that these should not be deleted. I'll explain why with an example. Let's say I have a wind farm that produced 1.1 gigawatt hours of electricity during the reporting year that was split between the definitions of used on-site and exported to the grid as shown in the diagram. To report this in EARS, I can first add an activity for the electricity that was produced from wind and consumed on-site. Enter an activity description. I can enter whatever I like here. Select energy for the source category, select electricity production as the source, and then choose electricity wind generation from the list of fuels. Select for use on site for the usage, and enter the quantity of 100,000 kilowatt hours. Then I click Save. Let's have a look at the activity summary table created in EARS. I'll just show the headings for now and show you what happens row by row. First, EARS will create the activity for electricity that was generated by the wind farm and that was used on site, which I've just created. This is totally expected. What you may not be expecting is that EARS automatically creates two new activities. The first is for the amount of wind energy that was consumed to produce the electricity. Note that the energy content of wind energy consumed, the orange oval in the middle, is equal to the energy content of the wind electricity produced for on-site use, the green oval down below. A 100% conversion factor of wind to electricity is assumed to allow the wind energy commodity to be reported. There's a lot of detail in this row, so I'll add this tag on the right, wind energy consumed to generate electricity. The second automatically generated activity is the on-site energy consumption activity for the electricity you consumed on-site. Note that the 360 gigajoules of energy consumed, the pink oval up top, is equal to the 360 gigajoules of electricity produced for use on-site. This means you used all of the electricity on-site that you said you produced for on-site use. To help keep track of this row, I've added a label to the right as well. Electricity consumed on-site. You can see here that EARS defaults to display the newest activity at the top of the table, which is why the activity I added is in the bottom row. That's what I did first, so it's the oldest one. The next thing to do is to add the activity in EARS for the electricity generated from the wind farm that was exported to the grid. It's very similar to before, but I've entered a different activity description and for use off-site on a network is selected to show that this electricity was exported to the main grid. Let's have a look at the activity summary table row by row. The bottom row is the activity I added for the generation of electricity from the wind farm for use on-site. There are no changes here. The details of the second bottom row, electricity consumed on site, haven't changed, but the order has. This was at the top of the previous slide, but now it's second last. The third row from the bottom represents the activity we just added, electricity exported to the grid. Now we see the EARS automated activity for wind energy consumed to create electricity. It is the top row, as it has most recently been updated. Note here that the total energy consumption, 3,960 gigajoules in the orange oval, is equal to the sum of all electricity produced by wind, the 3,600 gigajoules exported plus the 360 gigajoules for on-site use equal 3,960 gigajoules. If you were to read this top to bottom, it wouldn't appear in a logical order from a story perspective, but it is in a logical order from an oldest to newest activity perspective. There's a lot of detail here, but we hope that helps you understand why the activities are automatically created in EARS and why they appear in this order. The key takeaway is this: please do not delete these automatically generated activities. If you do, your report will probably be incorrect. Another tip is to check your facility location information each year before submitting your ENGA report. Location information has been a priority for us in recent years. Accurate location information is a requirement of the ENGA regulations, and it helps data users use the ENGA dataset effectively. The reporting requirements for location information are given in section 4.04a of the ENGA regulations. We've summarized what you need to report in this table, depending on the circumstances of your facility. You can also find this summary table in our ENGA Quick Help Topics document available on the ENGA Reporting Guides page. Once you have entered the latitude and longitude, we recommend you enable satellite view in the interactive map and zoom in on the location pin to make sure that it is placed on infrastructure that corresponds to the facility. For wind farms, we ask that you place the location on one of the turbines, and for oil or gas wells in remote areas, please place the pin on some type of above-ground structure that is clearly man-made, rather than on the geographic center of your exploration title. Finally, recapping information we sent as part of the EARS Open email on 7 July, any liquid fuel used to make ANFO explosive should be reported as consumed without combustion. And check that you've assigned the correct measurement criteria to each quantity of fuel consumed. If you have invoices from a vendor, you should use measurement criterion A. You can find more information about this in our Methods and Measurement Criteria guideline. So to recap what we've covered today, we've walked you through some general information, including where you need to go to find the ENGEL legislation and how to identify the versions that apply. We've discussed the changes to ENGEL legislation for 2023 to 24 and directed you to the changes for 2024 to 25. And we've highlighted specific areas that are either common reporting mistakes or priorities for us to ensure data quality. The information covered in this video is supplemented by a range of training tools and written guidance documents which are available on our website. Please refer to our guidance material or get in touch if you have any further questions. You can contact us by any of the methods shown on the screen.